Welcome to the LATAM MedTech Leaders Podcast, a conversation with leaders who have succeeded or plan to succeed in Latin America. Please subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, etc. Today, our guest is Dave Dolan, co founder and chairman at MultiFunctional Imaging, a company that provides software solutions for improving the efficiency and accessibility of PET CT, and PET MRI scanners. Dave has a track record of success in GE, BD, and J&J, among other companies. So, Dave, it's great to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Oh, Julio, thank you so much. It was great to get this invitation.
Awesome, Dave. All right, so let's get started talking about your journey. How is it you got to where you are today? What's your journey to Latin America? How is it you got involved with the region?
I'm a MedTech veteran. I started my career at GE Healthcare, like you brought up earlier, and I was very fortunate to be exposed to quite a few international roles and responsibilities. And Latin America was one of those. I've spent some time doing some business development work in Mexico City, Colombia, as well as Brazil. And so I can't say that I'm a long term veteran of doing business in Latin America, but I've come to strongly respect the marketplace.
Good, good, good. And let's talk about trends in Latin America, Dave. What are you seeing in the news? What do you know from experience about the region in terms of changes or trends are happening, political, economic, social, disease trends, whatever? Anything you can tell us about it?
Yeah, well, all of it's quite positive. I think when you're in terms of an early company, which technically multifunctional imaging is, a common commercialization path or regulatory path oftentimes would be to go through Europe and be able to do your trials over there. But with MDR, that's becoming untenable, quite frankly, in a lot of arenas. And I'm probably sharing nothing that the listeners to this show don't already know. In that, there's a lot of first in human studies that are going on. I know Intuitive is doing quite a bit of work in Chile right now. And the regulatory environment is much more favorable in Latin America, and you're seeing a not a subtle shift from people trying to commercialize or at least do the early regulatory work in the EU or in Eastern Europe, getting away from that and getting away from the U.S. and doing a lot of this work in Latin America. And so it is something that is out there. And I don't think it's much of a surprise to anybody right now.
That's an interesting point. I wrote an article about that specific topic, Dave, about a year and a half ago, before the UMDR was going to take effect. It was supposed to take effect or become active or a law in May before the pandemic, right? And it was pushed
Mhm.
a year.
Right.
But I interviewed about 30 CEOs of medical device companies about this specific trend that you're referring to, and I think you're right on point. I mean, it's certainly a a trend that will benefit Latin America in one way or another with clinical research and commercialization, because the old strategy of EU first and then the United States is being reevaluated now, I think, because of the stringent requirements, and you don't have notified bodies anymore. I mean, just a few have survived, for example, and it's getting tougher and tougher to do trials. So yeah, we've seen a trend in terms of the number of companies interested in doing first in human work in Latin America. We're being busier than ever, and also seen a trend of companies looking at Latin America to start commercialization after the United States, of course, and some other markets in Europe. But they're now looking at Latin America more favorably.
Yeah,
So yeah,
no, it's changed so much. I mean, when I first started, working in the medtech field 20 years ago, a lot of people viewed Latin America as, geez, it's such a vibrant, market, but boy, there's so many different regulatory fiefdoms within Latin America. It just didn't look attractive at the time. And now the shift is going the other way, where there's a lot of commonality in terms of regulatory pathways in Latin America. And like in our case, in multifunctional imaging, we've got a 510K, and a 510K is accepted in Latin America, in a lot of Latin America territories. And so we're actually the timing of our discussion is pretty compelling in that we're having a board meeting at the end of this week where, hey, we need a Latin America strategy. We need to see what we can do to penetrate this market because we think we can add a tremendous amount of value. And that's something that, hey, 5 years ago, I don't think people like me would have said.
That's quite interesting. All right, so let's talk about specific countries or your plans. Let's begin with your plans in Latin America. Do you have any specific countries in mind? Of course, you don't have to disclose confidential information, but any direction that you have in Latin America? Are you going to pick specific countries first, or you're going to go for the big ones first, and then the smaller ones, or you're going to go for middle countries first, and then the big ones? What do you have in mind in terms of
Yeah, well,
market
we're
entry?
pretty unique in that we're gonna approach this from how our technology can best serve the market. What we do in essence is we make PET scanners or PET CT scanners and PET MRI scanners run faster. And
Okay,
oftentimes it's older systems that our software actually delivers the most value for because we can make older systems operate much faster.
all
And
right.
so rather than sort of like, oh, we're going to focus on Colombia because we know physicians there, or we're going to focus on Brazil, we're going to be, no, where actually is the installed base available that we can take our products to? And yeah, there's still, I'm sure there's still some regulatory pathway differences between the different countries, but we're going to approach it more in terms of where can we provide the best value and where can we commercialize as quickly as possible.
Yeah, yeah, good approach. Yeah, I think that's in your case that's probably the best strategy. And going back to the issue of fragmentation in Latin America, but that's because that's always been a problem. I don't know how much you know about the Pacific Alliance. You don't know. I don't know how much you know about the initiatives of all the well, the top countries at least to homogenize the regulations to make them more similar in all these countries. Just for the listeners, as you correctly said, if you have CE mark or FDA approval, 510K approval in your case, the pathway for approval is pretty straightforward. In Colombia seems to have the fastest regulatory approval time in Latin America, except for Chile,
Mhm.
because Chile doesn't have any.
Right. Right.
So not many people know this. A lot of my clients get like shocked when I tell them this. Chile is quite a unique country in the region, but it's going to change, and specifically because the reasons I just mentioned, which is the Pacific Alliance, Latin America is going through a transformation where the countries are becoming more mature. Uh, Countries are becoming OECD members. Every year, there's a new OECD member, which says a lot about countries being serious about implementing best practices, best international policies, and best practices on how to do business, how to do regulatory approvals, how to do social strategies, whatever,
Mhm.
healthcare, etc. So we definitely see the trend of having more uniform regulatory requirements and accepting reference countries.
Mhm.
Colombia, for example, and that's the case in Brazil and Mexico, they accept reference countries like the United States, Europe. Some of them accept Canada, some of them accept Australia, Japan. So that makes things easier for foreign companies to do business in Latin America.
Yeah, no, it's tremendously exciting because,
Yeah.
boy, 10 years ago, people like myself saw Latin America as, hey, it's an excellent place to manufacture your products at, whether it be Tijuana
Yeah.
or Nogales or in Costa Rica. And now the table has completely turned up. No, actually, this is a marketplace for companies
Yeah.
like multifunctional imaging.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Dave, that's how the countries in the Pacific Alliance want the bloc to be portrayed as a marketplace. If you see what they're doing with the Pacific Alliance, which is something historical, I think, because the Mercosur, you know what that is, right?
Mhm. Yep.
In the south, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay, they haven't really made any traction in terms of creating an attractive, business friendly marketplace. Whereas the Pacific Alliance, since they have OECD member countries, Chile was the first one about 10 years ago, then Colombia, then Mexico, and Costa Rica just joined in May, I think. Peru will join very soon. And so Panama is also in the path to join the alliance. But for now, is only officially is Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile. And the marketplace that they're creating is about 260, 270 million people.
I was going to
So
say
they really want to
just those,
compete.
just those handful of countries. That's a very big market.
It is exactly. So, and the idea is to have, and I was speaking with somebody from that organization a couple years ago. I was interviewing her, and the idea is to have a single regulatory market where if you get approval in Mexico, you're gonna get instant recognition in Colombia,
Mhm. Yeah,
and that's already happening
absolutely. It's incredibly
in
attractive.
it is, yeah. There's another trade block that not many people talk about. I don't know why. It's probably because they are smaller countries, but it's called the Andean Pact. The Andean Pact. The Andean Pact are, of course, the Andean countries. Colombia used to be Venezuela, not anymore for obvious reasons. So it's Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia, I believe. And they have made it so similar to Europe, Dave. They're probably behind like 10 years. But just a couple of weeks ago, I read the news where a Colombian citizen can easily move to Bolivia or Ecuador and live and work
Mhm.
and study and get a job and everything. So it's just amazing what they're doing. So they're already integrating the regulatory environment for cosmetics, for food. So they're starting with low risk products, but eventually they're going to go up to drugs and medical devices. So
Yeah, no, it's an incredibly attractive market. And like you said, just a handful of countries right now, you said 270 million. Oh, by the way, that's about the size of the US market. That's pretty attractive.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So imagine if we all get our act together in Latin America, Colombian, of course, and we, as a region, we are 30 something countries, over 600 million people, double the size of the United States.
Absolutely.
But we have to get our act together. Come on, I mean, it's about time that we all join forces and move in the same direction. Not everybody.
Well, I mean, in the defense of Latin America, there's been tremendous progress over the last 5 years.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, yeah. The countries are becoming more mature. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Middle class is growing
Mhm.
and all that. Anyway, so going back to your experience, Dave, I'd like to dig a little deeper into your life in Mexico or your experience in other countries. Can we talk about that? I mean, what is it to be doing business in Mexico or elsewhere in the region?
Mhm. Yeah, no, my experience has been typically with either capital equipment or with disposable products. Specifically, most of my experience in Latin America came during my tenure at Beck Dickinson because we did have a manufacturing facility just outside of Rio. And so there were some strategy meetings and some interactions that I had in that area. Again, it was always just challenging meeting with the country leaders where there was just not a lot of commonality between the marketplaces. And I'm talking, this is 10, 12 years ago. There just wasn't a lot of commonality when I would talk to the country managers and I'd be saying, geez, we have the same product. Why is the product, priced this much per piece in Colombia versus Peru? And it was always a challenge where it was just geez, it's difficult to have the country managers and find synergies amongst themselves. even though our product was exactly the same and delivering the exact same clinical value, no matter what country it was being sent to. And so that was always, again, the big challenge, for us as a mass producer of medical devices is, geez, getting to the final mile, to the facilities was always a challenge. It was never a clinical challenge. It was really more of a business development challenge to be able to effectively market products correctly over there.
Interesting. Did you ever have to deal with distributors or find distributors or manage distributors in the region?
Yeah, it was again, it was by country because in some countries, the distribution was really the only effective way to go. There was countries like Brazil where we had to have a direct sales force,
Yeah,
because the market there expected a representative to be there upon adopting a new product, doing the in servicing and what have you. So again, it highlights what you're talking about. It was highly variable and fragmented in terms of
yeah,
which country you're working with in Latin America.
yeah. Any experience in Argentina, for example?
No, actually, very limited in Argentina.
And the reason I ask is because it's such a difficult market, such a it's ups and downs, economic ups and downs. It's just impressive. I mean, the inflation.
Yeah.
It's just every time I have an interview like this, Argentina comes up because that's like the prime example of challenges in Latin America.
I,
Political changes, left, right, center,
Yeah,
everything.
Argentina was always just a really quick discussion whenever we spoke with our country leaders, because literally the average price sold looked like a Richter scale because of the inflation issues that you're speaking of. And so it was just, whoa, this is really difficult for us to get our hands on. And so yeah, it wasn't a strategic imperative, at least
Yeah.
on Dickinson's part, to focus on that country.
Yeah. It's really a shame because it's such a developed country,
Hmm.
culturally speaking, socially speaking, educationally speaking. They used to be a very powerful country in the 20s, in the 30s, or
Absolutely,
40s, even,
absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So it's really a shame. In Buenos Aires is one of my top places to visit in Latin America. It's a beautiful, beautiful city.
Yeah,
It's
well, that's a bucket list place for me because everybody I know that has been to Buenos Aires does nothing but rave about
Yeah. It's a country full of Italians who speak Spanish.
it. And I hear the best steaks in the world is what I hear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Buenos Aires is a beautiful mix between Madrid and Paris,
Yep.
actually.
Yep.
Yeah, and a little bit of Rome. So,
Yeah, and multifunctional imaging. We're headquartered in Salt Lake City, Utah, and so as you're probably aware, there's a Church of Latter Day Saints
yes.
Mormon culture here, and so I have a lot of friends or associates that did mission work down there, and
Oh, yes,
everybody
exactly.
raves about Argentina.
Beautiful. I'm glad to hear that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you have to go. You have to
It's
go.
on the bucket list. It is.
And what about Colombia? Any experience in Colombia doing business in the country or
Yeah,
anything?
actually, Colombia was a pretty big and strategic country for Beckton Dickinson when I was there, because they, even back then, they would adhere to the 510(k) or PMA
Okay.
process
Yeah.
back then, and obviously it's a highly developed country with a very good healthcare system. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, in spite of the fact that it's not and from a population standpoint, it's not the largest marketplace. It's a highly developed marketplace, and
It is.
yeah, and like I said, we're going to be meeting as a board this coming Friday, and not only are we going to walk out with a Latin America strategy, I want to hear what our Colombia strategy is going to be.
Beautiful. I'm really happy to hear that as
Yeah,
a Colombian.
yeah,
and, and 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 just to add to that, I'm not. This is not a commercial for Colombia. It's a
mhm,
fact.
yeah,
Just like Chile is so easy to get into, Dave. I'm sure you know. As I said initially, you don't really need a regulatory registration in Chile. All you need is an importer, and you're good to go. You're in business.
right,
There's a voluntary registration process that needs to happen. What doesn't need to happen that you could do if you want to prepare yourself for the future.
right,
Probably in the next year or so, the Congress will pass a new law where they're going to make mandatory. the regulatory registration process as the other countries of the Pacific Alliance. Chile is just getting in the same train as the other countries so
Right.
that they have unified set of laws. Anyway, my point with this is that uh, just as friendly as Chile is, I would say the second country in Latin America in terms of friendliness and market ease of market access is Colombia. Just to give you a hint, the Colombia, the regulatory agency Colombia INVIMA is the only agency in Latin America that allows foreign entities to be the owners of the title holders of the registration certificate, the market clearance certificate. No other country does that. They all they all force you to have either a local entity or contract the services of a what is called a registration holder, and you have to pay hefty prices for that,
Right.
monthly prices for that, or annual prices, or even worse, they make you have the distributor as your title holder, which is not always a good idea because the distributor today may not be the distributor tomorrow. You know
Exactly.
that. You have to probably go through two or three distributors first before you find the right guy. So yeah, that says a lot about how much this country is one business,
Right.
how much they want to make it easier for companies to enter the market, to have access to patients, have access to innovative technologies faster than other countries.
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
And,
whereas
and
in
also,
Panama,
yeah, and also
oh,
these countries, they respect the intellectual property that technologies like multifunctional imaging bring to the table. For
yes,
instance,
they have to.
yeah, we've made a strategic choice not to go into China, for instance.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly. That's a great point.
yeah, because we
That's a
have to
great
share
point.
some of our IP, with their regulatory
Yes,
board, and quite frankly, we're
yeah,
not quite comfortable with that because we've written a
exactly.
lot of proprietary code, and
Yeah,
we would prefer that to be a trade secret. And in
yes,
Latin
yeah.
America, is very respectful of companies like ourselves in terms of that aspect.
Yes, that's a great point, Dave. And the reason for that, one of the reasons for that is first the OECD, right? They require you to enact certain laws to protect intellectual property and other type of protections, etc. And second, free trade agreements, right? If you want to have a free trade agreement with the US, you have to comply with certain guidelines or mandates, or you agree to respect or to have a way for companies to have access to a court system in case of infringement or things of that nature. So
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah,
And again, we're going to have a Latin America strategy come this Monday.
I'm so happy to hear that, Dave. It's great news for the region. It's great news for patients. It's great news for the healthcare systems of these countries. And well, we're close to the end of the show. I usually keep it short to about 30 minutes. I think we cover so much in only 20 something minutes. Is there any final words of wisdom you want to share with the audience? If you had the CEO of a medical device company in front of you, what would you say to him or her if he or she were just starting to explore Latin
Oh,
America as a
there's a
place to
fantastic
do business?
opportunity in Latin America right now. My company recognizes that, and we're not the first, and we're not going to be the last to recognize that. I think that with any new market you go into, it's important to identify and build tight relationships with partners that can help you get access to those markets, and that's where we're at right now. And it's folks like yourself, Julio, that we want to partner with and be able to take our technologies moving forward to Latin America. It's a fantastic opportunity, and I think if you're thinking that it's going to be an EU strategy first, I think you need to rethink that right now. I think you need to cast your eyes upon Latin America, especially for early stage companies like multifunctional imaging.
Excellent, Dave. I'm so happy to hear those words coming from you. All right, Dave. Thank you again for being the show. It's been a delightful conversation. I'm sure listeners got a lot from your insights and your wisdom and your experience. And I look forward to seeing you succeed in Latin America.
I look forward to speaking with you again. If there's any way that we can be of assistance to yourself, Julio, please let us know.
All right. Excellent. All right,
Okay.
Dave.
Thank you.